now we are starting our chapter 8, Transport in Mammals. So, this might be a tough chapter. वैसे तो initially, the things that we'll discuss, we have already studied about them in O levels, but I think cardiac cycle and the transport of carbon dioxide, transport of oxygen, chloride shift. These might be new things, and these are slightly trickier. But the initial things that we will discuss in today's class, they are easy, and you've already studied about them. Okay. So primarily, we'll discuss mammalian circulatory system, and we are already aware that since we have blood vessels, we have proper arteries, proper veins, and proper capillaries. This is exactly why we call our circulation system closed double circulation. So this is a term that you should be familiar with. Okay? Our mammalian circulatory system is closed double circulation system. We call it closed because the blood is enclosed in the blood vessels, and we call it double because the blood which has to be pumped across the whole body, it moves through the heart twice. Meaning there are two types of circulation that are taking place in our body. One of them is pulmonary circulation, and the other one is systemic circulation. So both of them combine, and this is exactly why the blood which has to be pumped, it circulates twice from the heart. Once in pulmonary circulation and other one in systemic circulation. ठीक है? And this is also a 2 mark question that could come in your paper 2. Okay, they ask you to define what is a closed double circulation, and you mentioned okay, blood always remain within the blood vessels, meaning in arteries and veins, and the blood passes through heart twice because of pulmonary and systemic circulation. Okay. Actually, then we need to know the difference between pulmonary circulation and systemic circulation. Okay, pulmonary circulation is the one in which blood is pumped from right atrium to right ventricle, and then right ventricle pumps blood into pulmonary arteries. So, since we are talking about pulmonary circulation, we need to be mindful. Okay, the arteries and the veins that are involved in pulmonary circulation, they are termed as pulmonary artery and pulmonary vein. The blood is then carried to lungs where it gets oxygenated and is then returned to left side of the heart. So you need to be mindful when we're talking about like right atrium and right ventricle. Okay, I don't know why, but students do get confused in this concept. They think right wala side is right, but you need to look at heart with respect to the patient. Okay, so your right hand side is the left hand side of the patient, while our left hand side, yani my left hand side is going to be right hand side of my patient. Okay, so this is not going to be right atrium or right ventricle. This part is going to be right atrium and right ventricle. Okay, this is my left side, but the patient has this side as right. So this is right atrium, this is right ventricle, and this is left atrium, and then we have left ventricle. Okay. So the blood is pumped from right atrium to the right ventricle, and then it pumps into pulmonary arteries. So pulmonary, वैसे तो arteries are responsible to carry oxygenated blood, but pulmonary arteries carry deoxygenated blood, and it gets oxygenated in the lungs, and then it's returned to the left side, and it comes from this side through pulmonary vein. Then systemic circulation is responsible to pump oxygenated blood from left atrium to left ventricle, and then from left ventricle when it contracts, the blood moves or it's pumped into aorta from where it's carried to the entire body. Okay? So pulmonary circulation is there to get our blood oxygenated, while systemic circulation is there to pump oxygenated blood. So this is why we say that blood passes through heart twice. Oh, all right. Then this is the transverse section of artery, vein, and capillary. This is a very important question. And now I think these terms might be new for you. वैसे तो I'm sure you're aware about artery and vein, but usually a question is there in paper 1 where they ask you to identify or they ask you to differentiate between an artery and a vein. So the most The most essential difference that you need to remember is that artery has a narrow lumen. It has a narrow lumen, whereas vein has a large lumen. Okay? Then there are three layers of artery, there are three layers of vein, and for them, you need to remember, okay, what is the composition of each of the layer of artery and each of the layer of vein. So small artery has this internal layer. It's known as tunica intima. Okay. So the internal layer, the innermost layer of artery is known as tunica intima. And then the middle layer of artery is known as tunica media. And then the outermost layer of artery is known as tunica externa. ठीक है, so intima, media, and externa, these are the three layers of artery, whereas you need to now remember their composition as well. So for tunica intima, just remember the fact that it has single layer of cells, and those cells have a squamous epithelium. This is the most important thing that you need to remember. Tunica intima of small artery has single layer of cells, and it is a squamous epithelium in shape. This could be as in paper one, essentially, where they ask you, where they give you multiple columns and they say, okay, what exactly is the composition of tunica intima? So this is why you need to remember this. Then you need to remember that artery has a small lumen. Then you need to remember the tunica media. I'll suggest a mnemonic for this, through which I learned tunica media of artery has SEC. So S stands for smooth muscle, E stands for elastic fibers, and C stands for collagen fibers. So this was a mnemonic I used to practice when I was doing A levels. SEC. So tunica media has SEC, smooth muscle, elastic fibers, and collagen fibers. Then my tunica externa of the artery just has E and C. Okay, SEC in tunica media, EC for tunica externa. So tunica externa has elastic fibers and collagen fibers. Now moving towards vein. So vein has this tunica intima. It's similar to the tunica intima of small artery. It has single layer of cells. It has this shape of squamous epithelium. But now for tunica media, the layer which is in center, you need to remember that it just has SE. Okay? It is not having SEC. It just has SE. Whereas tunica externa of vein has C. So SEC, EC, SE, and then C. ठीक है, these could I know this is much to remember, but you'll be able to learn it through mnemonics. ठीक है, SEC, EC आसान सी बात है for artery. Then SEC जो हम tunica media में which we were saying combined in a combined manner, SEC just split it up SE and then you have C. And for capillary, you need to remember it has a diameter of 7 7 micrometers, and it has just one wall, and that wall is 1 cell thick, and its lumen is big enough for a red blood cell to squeeze along. Okay? So there's not much detail that you need to remember for capillaries. अच्छा जी. So we have discussed के veins in arteries में क्या difference है. tunica intima है, intima में cells squamous epithelium के हैं. Then we have this middle layer, tunica media, it has SEC. Then outer layer is tunica externa, it has EC. फिर arteries के लिए you need to remember that it has the thickest walls of the blood vessel and they transport oxygenated blood away from heart, except for pulmonary arteries, which are responsible to carry deoxygenated blood towards the lungs. Then arteries reach the tissue to which they are transporting blood. They branch into small and smaller vessels called arterioles. The veins' function is to return the blood towards the heart, and it usually carries deoxygenated blood, except for the pulmonary vein, which carries oxygenated blood. And one of the differences between arteries and veins is that veins have valves. So these are semilunar valves. They're present so that blood could not move towards the heart. Blood could move towards the heart and not away from it. Because the blood pressure in veins is slightly less than the pressure in arteries. Okay, so veins have low blood pressure, and this is why it has semilunar valves, so that blood could move towards the heart. Then we have capillaries. So capillaries are the tiniest of all the blood vessels, and they take blood as close as possible to all the cells, and they allow rapid transfer of substances between cells and blood. Okay, so this could be asked what is the function of capillary? So you need to remember that blood Capillaries take blood to all the possible cells and they allow rapid transfer of substances between cells and blood, and that the walls of capillaries are very thin and they're just made up of single layer of endothelial cells. So this allows efficient transport of substances. Okay. Then we need to cover red blood cells, we need to cover white blood cells. So red blood cells is easy to remember. Okay, red blood cells have biconcave disc. We have already studied about it. And why is it biconcave? It's biconcave to increase the amount of surface area in relation to volume of the cell. So it gives a large surface area to volume ratio. And this is exactly why nucleus is absent in red blood cells. And that this large surface area enables lots of oxygen to be diffused quickly into and out of cell. And then these are very small, they're flexible, they do not have nucleus, mitochondria, or ER, and they lack organelles. And they lack organelles. Why is that so? So that they could provide more room for hemoglobin and that they maximize the amount of oxygen which could be carried by red blood cells. So this is just a basic detail that you need to cover. Then we have white blood cells. We'll do white blood cells in more detail when we'll do the topic of immunity. But superficially, we could look over here as well. Yeah, white blood cells, the main difference between WBC and RBC is that RBCs are responsible to carry oxygen, whereas white blood cells are there to fight against infections and that they have nucleus. Red blood cells do not have nucleus. The shape of red blood cells is biconcave, whereas the shape of white blood cells is completely spherical or it's irregular in shape. So it has nucleus and it is either spherical or it's irregular in shape, whereas red blood cells are biconcave. Then the commonest type of phagocyte neutrophils can be recognized by low nuclei and granular cytoplasm. So do not worry about this point because we'll do it extensively when we do immunity. And then another category of white blood cells is lymphocytes, which are primarily responsible to destroy microorganisms by and not by phagocytosis. So it's a process which is usually adopted by white blood cells to kill infections, but lymphocytes destroy microorganisms by secreting antibodies. So this is essential for you to remember. The lymphocytes are there to secrete antibodies which attach to antigens and then they destroy the invading cells. Acha. All right. So we'll stop over here. We'll begin with tissue fluid in our next class on Saturday.